You are not in control. You've been hijacked. Sorry to drop that kind of truth bomb right at the start of this episode, but I'm afraid it's true. Someone or something is running your body without your say-so. Your limbs are its oars, your senses are its lookout, and if you die, it dies too. This secret life hijacker is actually you, or more specifically, your DNA. DNA is often called the blueprint of life, and for good reason. It carries the instructions needed to build you and keep you alive. There's more to this molecule than meets the eye. In fact, your body is just one of many vehicles it has used throughout history to get around. But how can a lifeless molecule like DNA be alive? Well, it all comes down to what DNA actually does. Your DNA resides in nearly every cell in your body. And within each of those cells, it's packaged into structures called chromosomes. Humans usually have 23 pairs of chromosomes, one from each parent. Most of your chromosomes are made of hundreds or even thousands of genes lined up in a row, like beads on a string. Genes are the basic units of heredity. They carry the instructions needed to make proteins, which perform most of the tasks needed for life. So when we say your DNA is the blueprint of life, we mean these genes. They contain the plans for building you. But here's the thing. Blueprints don't build buildings by themselves. They need architects, engineers, construction workers, crane operators, accountants, inspectors. In other words, lots of bodies to do the actual work of construction. And in the case of your DNA, it needs bodies of all shapes and sizes. That's because DNA itself can't do anything on its own. It needs to be packaged with the right proteins to take on a certain shape in order to get things done. Those packages are the vehicles that allow DNA to move through space and time. DNA has been hitching rides since long before you or I were around. In fact, it's been riding along with all kinds of organisms for at least 600 million years. We can find DNA in everything from bacteria to fungi to single-celled amoebas, plants, animals, you name it. But wait a second, how can DNA be so old? The fossil record shows that the first organisms that had DNA did preserve any of their actual DNA. That's because DNA degrades pretty quickly after an organism dies. The oldest DNA ever found was only about 1 million years old. So how do we know that DNA has been around for 600 million years? Well, scientists compared the DNA of modern organisms and found that all living things use the same 4-letter genetic code. If all living things use the same code today, it seems likely that they inherited it from a common ancestor. In other words, DNA was probably around back when that ancestor lived. Extrapolating from the rate at which DNA mutates over time. Scientists estimate that this common ancestor lived about 600 million years ago. Of course, that's still millions of years before the first fossils of multicellular organisms. And yet, DNA has left no trace in the fossil record. So how do we know that it existed back then? Well, consider the incredible diversity of life that has sprung from DNA over the past 600 million years. Third, all this diversity came about through a few simple changes in genes across millennia. So to learn about the history of DNA, scientists can study the changes that occurred in those genes, which allows them to trace DNA back even further in time. One piece of evidence for how ancient DNA is comes from comparing the genes of living organisms. For example, scientists found that humans share 84% of their DNA with mice, with fruit flies. That number drops to 60%, and with yeast, it falls to 20%. Of course, we share more with mice than flies than yeast, because we are more closely related to mice than vice versa. But the point is, even very distantly related organisms share a lot of the same DNA sequences. For example, the gene that makes hemoglobin, the protein that carries oxygen in our blood, looks basically identical in humans and single-celled amoebas. The reason they have such similar genes is because they inherited them from a common ancestor that also had that exact gene. Scientists think this means that life on Earth probably started out simple and became more complex over time. Or, to put it another way, the amoeba that's inside you right now is probably much more closely related to you than you are to a whale. But the weirdest thing is that DNA isn't just inside you, it's actually part of you. Over billions of years, single-celled organisms started working together in groups, joining forces to form larger, more complex creatures. At some point, some of those early groups were the ancestors of the cells that eventually made you. And yet those ancient cells retain some of their original DNA, the very same stuff that's in amoebas today. Over time, these ancient genes stopped being useful. So they became non-functional, like the parts of your brain that govern telekinesis. But they never went away either. They became sections of DNA that don't code for anything, sections we call junk DNA. And here's the thing, you've got more of this ancient DNA in you than your own nuclear DNA. In other words, you're mostly made of bacteria. It's not that strange when you think about it. Every time a cell divides, it duplicates its DNA. That means that in theory, each human cell contains trillions of copies of your own DNA. Bet those bacterial cells duplicate too, passing their DNA down from one generation to the next just like you do. But that doesn't explain why so much of your DNA is bacterial. Well, here's the thing. While you were developing in the womb, your cells took in a lot of bacteria, especially in your gut. Some of that bacteria stayed inside your cells, never to leave. So as you grew up, you carried a little bit of yourself with you everywhere you went. In fact, your microbiome, the collection of bacteria that lives inside you, makes up around 10 trillion of your 37 trillion cells. As you might imagine, having trillions of bacterial cells living inside you can cause problems. Bacteria can make you sick, and if you don't kill them, they'll kill you. That's why your immune system spends so much time fighting off infection. But your immune system is also incredibly picky. If it kills off all the bacteria in your gut, it will kill you along with them. So, instead of killing all bacteria, it distinguishes between friend and foe. But some bacteria are more equal than others. Scientists have recently discovered that certain gut bacteria have their own DNA inside your cells. These bacteria give you beneficial things like vitamin K, which helps your blood clot. But these helpful bacteria don't live inside you. They live inside you. When they give you vitamin K, they're actually transferring their own DNA to your cells. Bits of their DNA that can integrate into your genome and make proteins that help you live. In other words, it's not just your DNA that's inside you, it's DNA that's inside you. And so while it may seem like you're in control of your body, really your body is just a vehicle for your DNA and the DNA of your microbiome. They're the ones that get to determine where you go, what you do, and how long you live. And you don't even know it. If this episode made you realize that you're not in control of your body, you should check out this playlist for more episodes about how you're always wrong. And if you want to learn more about DNA, stay tuned for more information.